Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know, we are in our 36th year. I usually talk to writers about what they're doing, what they've accomplished, what they're planning for the future. And I also usually add that we are open to other brands of art too. We've had on sculptors, musicians, artists. And I remind you that cable access television is a really wonderful community asset. Without it, none of the original programming that you see from 1623 studios would be available. So I want you to avoid any other way of getting onto the internet. Stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. I've said that I usually do those things because I'm not going to do them tonight. There is not another writer on tonight. I am going to interview myself. I've done that 2 or 3 times over the decades when I had a book of my own come out. And I've just had a book of my own come out in the summer of 2025. It is The Idea of Light. Or you can read it because you see that arc underneath the F and the F of and the F of flight. Idea of flight. I'm going to talk about that, this book today, and read a couple of poems and give you an idea of what's in it. And I might remind you once or twice that it's close to Christmas, so this would be a wonderful, ideal present. First, I'm going to talk about what it takes to put together a book. When do you try to put out a book? My advice is to not think about the book, just write as well as you can and try to publish the poems that you've written. When you get enough of them published, you get a pile of 40 or 50 poems, book size, then you can send it out. I think it's important to get everything published because publishers don't want to see someone who's just kind of thought, well, tonight I'm going to be a poet. I'll write some stuff and send it out tomorrow, and I'll be famous within a couple of weeks. It doesn't quite work that way. You have to spend some time on each poem, make them quality poems. Now, you won't be able to read it, but I'm going to show you the acknowledgement page from this this book, The Idea of Light. Those are the acknowledgements. All the publications and the poems that are contained in this book have been published. So it was a way of saying you have some pedigree when you go in to talk to a publisher. So that's one of the criteria that you need. You have to have quality work and you have to have enough of it to fill out a book, but get it published. Now, I've got a script here because I don't have anybody to talk to. I've got to follow my own guidelines here. On writing, I want to add this other piece of advice. If you're thinking about writing poetry or anything else, there's one rule. Sit down and write. Don't think about it. Sit down and write. Don't dream about it. Sit down and write. Don't tell all your friends. Sit down and write. A friend of mine, Tim O'Brien, the novelist, I met him a couple of years in a row at Bread Loaf Writers Conference. I asked him once what he thought was the really key element to doing good writing. He said, "Butt time." Quote, "Butt time." Sit down and write. Don't check the email 20 times. Don't put coffee on 5 times. Don't walk around the block to clear your head. Sit down and write. John McPhee, the very well-known journalist, I guess you'd call him a journalist, used to tie himself to a chair so that he wouldn't forget to sit down and write. So with that introduction about how this book got to be and how your book will get to be, I'm going to talk about the contents here now for a while. This book is in 3 sections. The first section is titled Halo and Clay. The second section is titled There Was a Certain Rich Man. The third section is called Ether and Belief. I'm going to talk about each of those sections briefly and read a poem from each, and then talk about some other topics, and then come back if we have time and read one or two additional poems. The first section, Halo and Clay, contains a poem called The Pedestal, which uses the phrase halo and clay. Now this poem, as many poets' poems are, is based on, at least partially, the poet's life. You can write about a rose, that's fine, but other topics are more personal and taken from past history. This poem is adapted from my experience, at least in part. For instance, I was in a seminary a long time ago for 3 years, and we were taught that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was the model of all women, and we had to really, really respect them and treat them with great kindness because they were elevated by that connection to Mary. Now, with a little humor thrown in, here is the pedestal. In the seminary, priests-to-be thought of girls in Marian images mostly, real flesh deflected by confessors urging their celibate selves and mentored boys to believe only in blessed virgins, chaste vessels of the Holy Ghost. And so, shock at a saint-seeming partner's mix of piety and dry martinis, lust, oh God, of opposite bodies, nature's laic way of spelling out the incarnation. Human love is laminate, halo and clay. And still, a lifetime later, whenever her reflections on courtship, rites of romance, the wedding day, continue to children or grandchildren, theorize a final time or dying, my original surprise. That's a poem from the first section, Halo and Clay. The second section is called There Was a Certain Rich Man. And I'm going to mention that there is a note in the back. There are several notes in the back explaining some of the poems. And I'm going to read the note that explains that title, A Certain Rich Man. Dives is the name traditionally given to the rich man in Luke 16:19. That's a reference to the New Testament. In these poems, he is upper middle class, upper middle aged, living the good life, the expected life, and disgruntled to find himself in a parable's hell. Ancient or contemporary, bitter or resigned, sometimes casual, sometimes a formal sonneteer, Dives is burdened by irony, intelligence, God-hate, and mulls over offensive themes only an offensive persona will permit. Now, persona is a term that writers use for creating a different sort of mentality to speak in a voice with attitudes that aren't necessarily the author's. It's like a ventriloquist dummy, really. And this whole section is Dives speaking. Now that's a lot to explain in one go when you've never seen this poem before or this book before. So I'm going to start with the next poem, and it's going to be Dives on the New Testament. In other words, this is Dives talking about his original creation in Luke. He's talking about being in the New Testament. Although, as that note I just read points out, mostly he's a modern American who just can't figure out why he's not, a hero to everybody in the world because he's made some money and he's been doing what he's supposed to do. dives on the New Testament. Camels and sand, dives east damned for misdemeanors, being human. Owning livestock, a little silver, the penthouse in Jerusalem, a villa overlooking the Jordan. Nothing lavish, except the glass mosaics of Messalina and my darling children, Maximus, Antonia. For them, I bought a mason in Antioch, saving that lazy slave from the galleys, offering alms in my own way. Lepers and loaves, I dare thee, bear the burden, original sin, the need for linen, pride, dying. And once in hell, learn a liar's giving you lines. Send Lazarus that he may dip his finger in water. Dives, begging from the likes of Lazarus. See, Dives is a jerk. Even in hell, he doesn't want to be embarrassed by having this poor, poverty-stricken leper, Lazarus, giving him water. He'd rather go without, even in hell. So he's a, what do I say? He's kind of a prick, you know. The third section of this book is called Ether and Belief. And there's a number of poems in it about presence that's away from us, away from our town, away from our planet, away from our normal psychological being. And like many, many poems, as I mentioned earlier, it's based on personal experience, often. I'm going to read a poem now. It's based on personal experience. My wife and family and I used to go up to northern Maine and camp. We had a little campground up there. We went up 2 or 3 times a summer, pitched a tent, and it was good. Don't do it anymore. Fort Kent's a long ways away. So I've made that trip to Fort Kent there and back, and I started to write a poem with notes I had taken on that trip. And this is a poem about that trip and about being in Fort Kent and about the need to get out of, to just unplug, to get out of where you are, turn off the computer, turn off the cell phone, turn off the phone, everything, and get away from it all. This is about that. It's called The Temper of Presence, Fort Kent. Apped out and monitored, mindless. You turn, of course, to Fort Kent because no one knows where the hell is Fort Kent anyway, even Mainers. And if they do, don't care, never go. From Boston, 8 mortal hours. Same as south to D.C., but opposite sprawl the metro traffic. Noise and people thin before Portland. Or at a log cabin, tourist booth, you lock phones in the trunk of the car, unfold a map, light a cigar. Beyond Augusta, signs for kindling, bait, wooden wishing wells, and lookouts. The birthplace of Ed Muskie, mulch. At a blueberry stand, you buy blueberries. Beyond Bangor, along the Penobscot, pine horizons and town after isolated town, the sole center of this or that. Moose safaris, arrowheads, canoes. In a rustic county at Houlton, you leave the highway and head for Mars Hill, homing in on Presque Isle, Caribou, and Fort Kent, which is crucial too. The blockhouse, fishing derbies, ploy, ending or begun Route 1, and the Whitewater St. John, fed by the Allagash and Big Black. Plenty of parking. You park. Open the bag of blueberries. Sit. Listen. I recommend a trip to Fort Kent if you've never made it. You have to do it in the summer because some of the roads up there are closed in the winter. And if you do it in the summer, then the St. John will have broken up the ice from the winter, and you'll be able to enjoy looking across over into New Brunswick more. I want to say a couple words now about how you get your book published. Well, there's traditional ways. You can send the book out to publishers, and you can enter contests. The competition is terrible. It's just horrible. And there are some wonderful, wonderful, talented people out there. There's also a lot of junk, but there are many talents out there, so the competition is stiff. This book, I have to say, bragging a little bit, was a finalist in the Colorado State competition, the Elixir competition, Wordsworks competition, and several others. And I got tired of the lottery, so I decided to go with another means of publishing, a so-called hybrid press. A hybrid press is one in which the publisher, who's reputable in many cases, and the author cooperate, and the author takes some responsibility for the marketing of the book. This is published by Main Street Rag, which is a very reputable publication. They have a quarterly poetry journal, which is very, very good. They vet all of their applications. You have to have been published in the magazine to get considered for their publication. So it's a good way to get published if you're tired of the lottery and you don't have 30 or 40 years to look forward to. So I would advise to consider the other ways of getting published besides simply sending it out to, a big publisher in New York. Where can you buy this book? Well, you can buy it at the bookstore on Main Street, which I highly recommend. It's a wonderful bookstore. All the copies they have are signed, and it will help the bookstore. It is not available through Amazon for a couple of reasons. Amazon gouges people who sell through it like crazy. And also Amazon, it's Mr. Bezos, no, it's, never mind. I'm getting my owners mixed up. Amazon is a gouge, and it's also a bully. It bullies the independent bookstores, which are fighting hard to survive, like the bookstore on Main Street. So I want to promote that, the bookstore that is, and I want to promote that and say clearly why we're not going with Amazon because of those two reasons. You can also go to my website. You'll see my website name on the screen. You can go to that website, and there's a link right there to Main Street Rag and information, more information about the book and about my background, more than you'd ever want to know. But you can go there and get a link directly to Main Street Rag and buy a couple of books. Now, we have a little bit of time left. I'm going to read a couple more poems. I'll start with one from each section, the same process I went through earlier. From the first section, Halo and Clay, I'm going to read a poem that's sort of based on the idea of a town like Gloucester being gentrified. When I moved here many, many years ago, Gloucester was still very much an active fishing community, and it is much less so now. There were many more bars in Gloucester at that time, and you would see, and if you went out to a bar, you would see fishermen coming in, big, huge wads of cash, because they had just gotten in from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks out fishing. I miss that kind of Gloucester, and I also miss the Main Street. There used to be grocery stores on Main Street. There used to be hardware stores on Main Street. This poem is based, therefore, on personal experience, but only in a general way. It's called Nothing You Need. Main Street's a cheese shop, galleries, and a bright brew pub featuring pumpkin harvest ale, free-range chicken, and kale. A retro pharmacy with show globes, the State Bank beyond Bordeaux, your candles only, your soaps only, bricks spiked with pumice and coffee, angles cut in the chic but cruel way that marks artful vertu. Nothing you need. No hardware, no grocery or dime store, no lumber, gravel, or paint. Nothing to suggest sweat, like the ancient Ford Escorts and Crown Vics that appear weekday mornings to construct or plumb, clean, and leaf blow. Jesus, Mary Kay, football. No Pilates or favorite famines. Peace on earth, blissful chickens. In the strip mall south of town, designer denim, cell phones, and our single big box next to a 10-screen XXX and Noir at Night G matinees, a JP and gaming arcade, the beer and booze drive-in, free piercing with large tattoos, a copy center and Mattress Mart, the urgent care, Candy's Bar. You can see that that's partly taken from experience here in Gloucester, but partly elsewhere because of the mall mentioned and because of the big theater. And so I'm going to read another poem now from a certain rich man. Now, all of the people all of the poems in A Certain Rich Man are in Dives' voice. It's Dives talking. And this play, I've had too much coffee. This poem is called Transgender, and it's in Dives' voice, and it's about Dives noticing in his age that it's kind of easier to take a leak in the bathroom by sitting down instead of standing. There's some humor in these poems. It started a decade ago, unmade by prostate, frequency, apnea, age. At first, in shame and secrecy, at night, no marksmanship, no light. So a relaxed drowse, elbows on knees, and dilated and easy back to sleep. Always now, at least at home, I sit. The gender expression now appropriate. My one complaint's the loutish men in my life, sons and brothers, friends, whose fickle piss dries on tiles and curtains inexplicably far afield. Divey's toilet is a fixed routine. Tinkle neatly and with impatience clean. Now I'm going to read a poem from the last section, Ether and Belief. I'm not going to read the first poem, Idea of Light, or the last poem, Flight Time. Those would be spoilers. But the Flight and Idea poems bracket the whole book. Okay. Here is a poem called An A.M. April sky, and it's about simply observing the sky, which I do often. I have a telescope that I don't take out too often, but I do have a telescope and follow it. So this comes out of some of that star watching. An AM April sky. God-wandering Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars clear a maple in our suburban yard and stare steadily down, the gaze behavior of gods. Given the Romans' needy, geocentric lens, light bringer, harvest, father of war, now in Capricorn, loyalty, and Aquarius, brains, post-Copernicus, we understand elliptical paths, the flicker-killing arc-seconds of a disk, present metrics describing hydrogen giants and rock, an Earth-sized hurricane, rings of water ice, bellicose iron oxide. Fixed diameter and distance, temperature, mass. Info courtesy of probes and rovers, orbital eyes and soil samplers. A branding, but that's given to the Columbia Hills, the Rolling Stones. Ardent, early rising amateurs log coordinate sets, epoch and transit times. Magnitude makes the planets easy to track as they outshine stars in the slowly brightening sky. And the convenient names of deities are conserved. That is, we still use the convenient name of deities beside the names for other stars. But the deities stand out because of tradition, and we don't refer to the orange planet number 7. We would say Jupiter. In fact, Jupiter's not the 7th. I think it's the 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's the 6th. So that's a taste of the idea of light. Thanks for being so patient and not for turning the TV off. I hope you can get it. And sometime drop in the bookstore to buy that, because the bookstore has those signed copies. Thanks for being with us tonight on The Writer's Block. I hope you've learned something about poetry, or at least how to get published on The Writer's Block tonight. If we've done that, then The Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us. Good night.